So let's just check in with Sister Susie, our esteemed producer. I think she's live from the... you in the saloon bar today?
Yes, I am indeed.
Okay, so how was the pub over Christmas? Was it good?
Yeah, it was very, very busy. Welcomed, now exhausted.
Right, fair enough.
well.
The drinks trolley's here.
Yay!
Very good.
So, thank you, Sir David. Just leave it there. What are you picking from the drinks trolley for us?
Well, Dave in Telford on the Drive Time Drama inspired me earlier, and I thought it's wet and it's miserable and it's dark, so why not a cup of tea all round?
Okay.
Yeah, no?
No, I don't like
Well, it's
tea.
January. People might be doing dry January, which you shouldn't. You should support your local pubs. But if you are, nice cup of tea.
Have you got any... oh, never mind.
Wow.
So today's...
Yorkshire tea I always go for.
Of course.
That's my preference.
Got any chamomile?
I do have some chamomile. I can knock you up a cup of chamomile.
I'll have some of that. First confession of the year is a New Year confession, and it comes from Frank. Thank you very much, Frank, for this tale. Father Simon and your honourable collective, I'm writing to request forgiveness from your good selves. It's New Year's Eve, 1971.
Oh.
I am a 15-year-old. Several months earlier, in fact, a lot of this confession reads like it's a novel. Okay.
Oh, very good.
But we'll get to it.
Yeah.
Several months earlier, my mum finally plucked up the courage to leave an abusive relationship, and my mum and her 6 children left the family home one overcast day. We all left with only what we could carry, and for me it was a couple of carrier bags of clothes and a small transistor radio and earpiece. Whenever I went to bed, I would listen to a very crackly Radio Luxembourg.
Ah, of course.
Very happy memories. The Fab 208, we were scattered far and wide at various relatives. My elder brother and I were sent to live with my Aunt Gladys and her partner Chaz in the city of Portsmouth. The accommodation was a pretty spacious maisonette above a naval tailor's shop, a stone's throw from the main dockyard gates. My aunt and uncle had never had children and lived a bit of a hippie lifestyle, so it seemed to me anyway. My aunt dressed in a long, baggy and flowery clothing item number, which I think is called a dress.
Yeah.
And didn't really believe in housework.
Okay.
I think she'd have been quite happy living in a tent or a camper van. My uncle was a jolly man, was always in a very tired-looking suit, had an overgrown beard and moustache. He didn't really have a job, but he was very accomplished as a musician and could play so many different instruments. They were a very happy couple and very kind to my brother and I. Back in the day, there seemed to be pubs on every street. Being near the dockyard, there were many more than usual, and that is where my uncle would ply his trade. He would have a gig virtually every night in one pub or another, and a lot of afternoons as well. Excuse me. On this particular New Year's Eve, he did an early session in a pub just around the corner, so he could come home for New Year Day celebrations. At about 11 p.m, he arrived home rather merry, it seemed, and announced that we would all see in the new year in drinking the finest, fine old Scotch whiskey. And he rummaged around in the back of a cupboard and produced this dusty but very valuable bottle. Clearly it was reserved for special occasions. He poured 4 very generous tumblers of what he described as a drop of pure nectar. He flung open all the windows that overlooked the street and said that come midnight, all the ships in port would sound their horns. He sat down at the piano and said, we'll have a good old sing-along, the way you used to do back in 1971.
Yeah, back then, yeah.
And he began to play. I put my glass to my lips to take a swig, but as I did, I caught what some people would call a sweet aroma. To me, it sounded like disgusting cheap aftershave, and so therefore I only pretended to take a sip, wondering what to do. Not only did I find it smelling disgusting, I was, as I told you at the beginning, Father Simon, 15 years old, and I knew that breaking the law in this matter was a very serious misdemeanor, and I didn't want to go down that path.
No.
I had several pretend sips during the first number as my uncle was playing Penny Lane by the Beatles. I eased myself closer to one of the open windows. While singing at the top of my voice, I launched the contents of the glass out of the window. As I did so, I heard a woman scream out.
Oh, no.
Just below the window. I immediately sat down so as not to draw attention to myself, and and I continued singing, not daring to look out of the window. I could still hear the woman screeching that a bird had done a whoopsie on her head. Which is how we referred to it in those
Yes, it
days.
was.
I felt a little relieved that no one was going to knock on our door and complain. I hadn't had the blame. A short while later, my uncle noticed my glass was empty and deposited another helping in my glass.
Oh, yes, of course
I didn't have the courage to say I didn't like it and that I was 15.
Of course.
Because to my uncle, it was clearly a drop of the good stuff. Just before the stroke of midnight, I manoeuvred myself close to another window. But before I let loose with this glass, I had a quick peek out of the window before depositing another complete tumbler of fine old expensive whiskey onto the pavement below. We sang Old Lang Syne, and then my aunt had us hanging out the windows, listening to the ship's foghorns and calling out Happy New Year to the revellers pouring out the pub. That was the only time I celebrated the New Year at my aunt and uncle's. I have happy memories of that evening, but tinged with a little guilt. Sadly, my aunt and uncle are no longer with us, but I still feel I need my uncle's forgiveness for wasting his pure nectar. I would also ask forgiveness from the poor young lady who was just enjoying a night out with friends and who just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah, well.
And who thought a seagull had deposited a package all over her. Also, she might have been a teetotaler, Father Simon, or someone from the Salvation Army, maybe, who now was saying they'd been dumped on by a pigeon but was smelling of whiskey. What were the implications of that?
Well, I don't know.
Serious reputational damage.
Oh, right. Okay.
Anyway, I put myself at your mercy, of your holiness, your clergymen, your clergywomen, and all of your parishioners. Let's just see how forgiving we are. And then Frank says, best wishes to you all. I have enjoyed the confession slot over your shows over many years. I discovered Greatest Hits Radio quite by chance some months ago. Always thrills the advertising.
Yeah, they love hearing that. Yeah.
And retuning my car stereo. I love the music, love the format, love the show. Listen every day.
Yes.
Love Frank. Okay, Sister Susie, what do you say to Frank?
Well, Frank, I don't feel like you've done anything wrong here, really. I feel like it's your uncle's fault because he should have kept it for himself. What's he doing sharing it with a 15-year-old anyway? So I don't forgive your uncle. But of course you're not going to like whiskey at 15. I just think that's an obvious thing. So I'm going to forgive you. Frank,
Yes,
I don't think you did anything wrong.
Correct. I think we can forgive Frank, but I'm not sure that we should forgive the uncle. Anyway, but let's just check in with the brother from another.
Yes,
country.
I mean, what a heartwarming story this was to begin the saga that will be 2023. And I love some others do have them reference as well about the
Done a whoopsie.
done a whoopsie. Very nice. Love that as well. But my quibble with Uncle Chaz is not the offering of the whiskey. It's more flinging open the windows in January. Who's opening the windows in January? I'm not paying to heat the street.
Yes,
it's
but
absolutely disgraceful.
You can hear the
Get
ships.
the windows
Hear the
shut.
ships.
No wonder it's cold. You've got the windows open. It's January. So for that reason, I'm going to forgive.
Very, very strange
What?
behaviour.
Yep.
Okay,
Total sense.
it's the people's verdict. Do you forgive Frank? Yes or no? On the text, please, 61054. You start your message with Simon. Tonight's confession came from Frank, who, when he was much younger, was given some whiskey. He didn't want to have it, so he chucked it out of his uncle and aunt's window, straight onto the head of a woman who thought she'd been, thought a pigeon had
Yes.
done a whoopsie.
Correct.
In the terminology of the 1970s. Anyway, here's the people's verdict. What do they
So
say?
Joe in Oxford says, forgiven, there's nothing worse than being given a drink that you don't like and then feeling socially pressured to drink it. Frank did the right thing.
Yes, he did.
But Liam in Chester says, not forgiven. Why didn't he just say he didn't want it? I'm sure the uncle would have gladly drunk his share. A waste of good whiskey. But Jess in Northampton says, forgiven, as much as I can appreciate a finely crafted whiskey, I would definitely do the same if it was a drink I didn't enjoy. A friend of mine gave me a chamomile tea once, which was so awful, I wish I'd had a window nearby to throw it out
I
of.
like a good chamomile
Oh,
tea.
do you?
Yes.
Okay.
Anyway, but obviously, Frank did the right thing.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
not consuming that because
Correct.
he's completely wasted
Yes.
on someone who's 15. Anyway, Frank, you get the smart speaker. We would love to get your confession. And if we use it, you get a smart speaker. Send it to, it's got its own email address. That's how important it is. You send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Okay, that's very good news. And
Oh, there's a trolley.
thank you, David. Just leave it there.
Yeah.
What are you selecting for us today?
Well, Matt turned his nose up at my cup of tea yesterday, so
Mm-hmm.
why not have a full-fat Rioja?
Oh,
Glass of
there we
Rioja
go.
this
Yeah.
evening.
Massive.
It's
Yeah.
like massive, giant glass.
Very good. Always drink responsibly.
Yeah, obviously.
Today's confession comes from Roger, Father Simon and the Confessional Collective, we must now go back to the 1970s, a very different time for many. I was primary school age and at home. We had a television with a meter on the side.
Oh.
It was a rental television, and you put 50p's in if you wanted to watch something.
Of course, yeah.
Wow.
150p would give you a timed view. TV use had been budgeted, and Mum had a pile of 50p's on the box for daily views of our permitted watching. We all enjoyed the TV, so it was a treat to have the box for entertainment on dark evenings.
Of course.
If you wanted to watch the programme,
Yep.
you had to put in 50p in the box. In our home at this time, if a child was ill, they remained at home and a neighbour checked on them, or Mum came home at lunchtime, or you just remained inside the home in your pyjamas and got better.
Okay.
That's the way we treated
Yes.
illness. The doctor would even visit, knowing the key would be on a string, which was just through the letterbox. A very different
Wow.
time indeed.
Very.
I was gifted a childhood of several sickly times, and I was known for this by the doctor. I had many days at home with the television and no supply of funds for wasting on daytime viewing. See, even then,
Yeah.
you didn't want to waste your
No,
time on
no.
daytime viewing. I had exhausted my books, dotted everything I could, finished all the math sheets, scrubbed the kitchen cooker, the entire house actually. I studied ants on new overhead lines that entered the property. I drew pictures of damp patches on the carpet and mould on the shower curtain. Anyway, you get the picture.
Yeah.
I dreamed of being able to watch the Hollywood afternoon film that would be shown on the TV. But how could I get the TV to work without having any money? If it wasn't Penny for the Guy or Christmas carol singing, we had no way of earning money in those days. This is a very period piece, this one is. There was no TV budget for a sickly child, and my plan was the perfect answer. I've never heard of this being done. Okay, I pressed each coin into soft plasticine. I popped that in the freezer for an hour.
Wow.
I would then take out the 50p coins, return the coins to the meter box ready for permitted viewing, and then filled each plasticine indentation, each mould with water, and popped the block back into the freezer. When it came out, I got a frozen piece of ice, obviously,
course.
shaped like a 50p. It slotted nicely into the push-turn mechanism, dropped to the box, bang!
Wow.
I had the power.
Oh, I say.
Weeks and weeks
Oh,
of
dear.
Elvis, Fred and Ginger, Gene Kelly, Dancing in the Rain, film after film. It's beginning my adoration of Barbra Streisand was right now with my frozen 50p's, all funded by my ice currency. If anyone came in to check on me and the TV was on, I would say, oh, it's just a little bit left over from yesterday, it'll probably go off in a minute, and then load another ice coin into the machine. I was a genius. So proud of myself. A new currency and more reliable than cryptocurrency and safer.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes.
So then I told my brother, and he enjoyed some extra viewing too, before Mum got home from work. It was turning into a sweet deal. That is, until the man who empties the TV box arrived.
Dear.
Mum had even warned me he was coming before leaving for work. If he leaves any extra 50p's for us as a rebate, you can have 2, she called out as she left for work. Well, the TV man turned up. He opened the box. He looked inside. This is strange, he said. Is it? I asked. Is there any rebate? He went into the kitchen and I followed, thinking he needed the table to count all the 50p coins on from the usual viewing. He poured the contents of the box into the sink, and I watched as what looked like pints of water, followed by just 2 50p coins, real coins made of metal, flowed into the sink. Oh dear, I said, is that usual? I had to avoid discovery by playing it cool. Does the TV produce water as a byproduct of the electrical charge and the TV rays and the satellites and the telescopes?
Yeah.
I wasn't that good at science. No was the reply. This is very unusual, and no water is not a byproduct of TV rays. A long pause while the man thought over every possibility. I'd already worked it out. I'd loaded too many 50p coins made of ice. Yes, I think we got that,
Yeah,
Roger.
yeah.
I guess he'd worked it out too, because he said, it looks like we need to take your TV in for repair. Curses. It was all over. The TV man took away my film viewing box, replaced it with a nice new one that broke the ice before it turned the coin.
Oh, no.
Progress is not all it's cracked up to be, Father Simon. I was too young to know if Mum was blamed or not, but I expect she was at some level. But it was all me. Am I forgiven? Well, let's just find out, because I think probably people will be looking on you in a generous state of mind, Roger. But let's check in with Sister Susie. What do you make of Roger's television 50p ice confession?
Well, Roger, what I have to say first is obviously water and electricity is not a good mix. So that is, first of all, be careful and don't do what Roger did. Not that you can with a meter telly now, but I have to say I think I'm going to forgive you, Roger, because, you know, all the things you did when you were ill, plus the confidence you had when the meter man came over, that alone deserves forgiveness, I think. So from my book, apart from the slight danger, I forgive you.
Just the feebleness of the mechanism which would thought a 50p coin made of ice was actually proper currency. Brother from another gutter, what do you say?
Obviously, we go along with what Sue said about water and electricity. That said, what amazing ingenuity that was. Being able to come up with that plasticine in the freezer and then water in the mould and then it becomes ice and then stick it in the telly. Oh, fabulous. I'm going to forgive just for the line, is that usual? No, not really. Not usual at all.
Oh, sorry, what did you
Yeah, so I'm going to forgive. Very naughty but ice.
Okay, all right.
That's why I forgive.
People's verdict, please. Do you forgive Roger, yes or no? On the text 61054. Start your message with Simon. You can email confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. And just before the news at 6 o'clock, we had today's confession from Roger about his television, the rental television with a 50p meter, and his invention of an ice currency.
Yes.
Which he used to operate this machine, which obviously could have been dangerous, wasn't, but it did seem to fill the one particular part of the television with water. Anyway, we were after the people's verdict, and it's come in, and here it is, and Matt will read it for you.
Yes, most people forgiving. Alice in Newcastle says, I agree with Susie. A bit dangerous mixing water and electricity, but have to admire Roger's thought processes. Mick in Bradford says, forgiven, although I'm surprised the water didn't evaporate from the head of the television. How cold was Roger's house?
Yes.
And Jezza says, forgiven, I did the same thing when I was a student for the coin-operated washing machine in the halls of residence laundrette.
Oh, okay, so maybe it's an established thing. Also, I think it was probably safe because you would think that the meter box would be separate to the television.
Yes, I would have thought
because if you can remove the box and then empty it into the sink, it would going to be... Anyway, that's the smart speaker sorted for today. If you have a confession, maybe you've invented a currency.
Yes, invented a currency,
yes.
Wow.
Not you, Sam Bankman-Fried.
Oh, not you.
Maybe you have a TV rental confession. I don't know what that would be.
Yes.
Maybe stuck at home getting better. Confession.
We'll have to do that.
Stuff you went up to. Anyway, we would like to hear from you. If we use your confession, you get one of those smart speakers. You send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Just checking everything's working well there. Oh, hang on, I need to fade her up.
Yeah, that would be a good idea.
Yeah. Okay,
Sorry.
yeah.
Faders were set to stun by mistake. Yes, okay. And don't forget, of course, it's on the drinks trolley.
Oh, the trolley!
Just coming in at the last minute there. A little late on cue, David. Maybe you could just be on time. What's our Thursday drink, please?
Well, a lot of people this weekend or next weekend might be thinking about doing a little wassail to the apple trees. So why not a nice pint of cider, or a half if you prefer.
Okay, all right, very good. I am going to wassail a little bit later
Wassail,
on.
yeah.
So today's confession, and the winner of the smart speaker goes to Jerry, who sends in tonight's tale. Simon the Confessor, brother from another gutter, and Draconian do-gooder, Sister Susie.
Yep.
There you go. A while back, you read out a confession concerning popcorn trickery in the cinema. We did. I too have a popcorn theatre confession, but mine is from just before the last Christmas we've had. This December just gone, my wife and I took two of our grandchildren to New York to see the world-famous Radio City Christmas Spectacular, starring the equally world-famous Rockettes, who are said to be the world's longest chorus line.
Wow.
This goes on for miles.
Yeah, that's good for them.
Only some of them can fit on the stage, but they keep on going. Having booked the best seats in the house, we took our place at the end. These are the grandparents to have.
Clearly. Off to see the Rockettes.
Yes.
We took our place at the end of our row in plenty of time. An older gent made his way along from the opposite end of the row and sat next to me. Being a friendly American from Florida, he instantly struck up conversation with me, during which he explained that his wife was looking for refreshments at the theatre bar. Now, the Radio City seats nearly 5,000 people, so it was clear she would be some time. Meanwhile, my granddaughter had opened her American-sized plastic bucket of popcorn and was tucking into its contents. Popcorn is hard to resist, Father Simon, and each time chatty neighbour drew breath, I found myself reaching over to pinch a handful from the bucket. Presently, a family of 3, with a larger version lookalike of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson bringing up the rear, came along the row in front of us. Dwayne sitting as directly as one can in staggered seating, right in front of me. Marvellous. Now remember, everyone had come in from the bitter New York winter and was bundled in seasonal pullovers and coats. The Rock, however, was sporting a tight-fitting grey T-shirt that not only displayed an impressive collection of tattoos, but also his impressive physique. Standing up to allow another family to reach their seats in our row, I was reminded of Saturday Kids Club at the Odeon, when you could sit up on the edge of your flip seat before sliding into place as it tipped back down. Still works 60 years later, and I had a little chuckle to myself. Right on time, a pair of massive Wurlitzer organs appeared from the sides of the auditorium to introduce the show as the house lights faded. Excuse me. While my Floridian neighbour looked this way and that for his wife, everyone else settled back in their seats. I had the bright idea of tipping a sizable pile of my granddaughter's popcorn into the dustbin-shaped lid of the bucket to save from reaching over. At that moment, the Floridian spotted his wife in the aisle to our right and gave a discreet, for an American, wave in her direction. "Hey, baby doll, over here!"
Yes!
He was in the mafia.
Yeah.
Still bundled in her winter coat, she started to shuffle towards her spouse, and we 4 on the end of the row all stood up to make way. Clutching 2 coats, scarves and hats in one hand, I managed to hold the lid full of popcorn safely out of the way in my other hand as the ample Mrs. Florida 1961 squeezed past. Of course, as I stood, so my seat had flipped up behind me. Reliving my Odeon past, I thought it best to sit on the edge and wait for it to lower me into the correct sitting position. Not the best idea I could have had. Without warning, the seat crashed from vertical to horizontal in a nanosecond, shooting the popcorn straight up, only to shower down on Dwayne Johnson's bald head. Most of them bounced off his bonce like ping-pong balls.
Oh, well, okay.
A few magically stuck there, held no doubt by his copious sweating.
Seems unnecessary.
He jumped from his seat, scattering popcorn far and wide. He turned round to see what had happened, face like fury. All he saw was an innocent child with her crumpled grandpa, intently watching the show whilst holding an empty lid from a bucket of popcorn. A small child and an old guy were clearly not worth bothering with, so he just squinted Clint Eastwood-like. It was a look that said, "Do you feel lucky, punk?"
Another voice.
Another
Wow.
American
This
voice.
is so good.
This is excellent.
When the lights finally came up at the end of a fantastic spectacular, I glanced down to see the carpet covered in popcorn. There was nothing to do but ignore it, whilst feeling sorry for the between-show cleaners. You could have always just cleaned a bit up, Jerry.
Yeah.
There was nothing to do but ignore... I read that bit. The Floridian was also looking disgustedly at the mess and turned his back to leave without a word, considering how chatty he'd been previously. Brother Simon, I don't seek forgiveness from the Floridian. After all, he and his wife had been... If they'd been more organised, she would have been in place before the start of the show, and I would have not had to stand up. And don't forget, I did lose a lot of popcorn on the way. Plus, they were in the mafia. I
don't think that was true.
I also don't really seek forgiveness from Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson lookalike guy, as I'm sure I could have taken him.
Oh, yeah.
I actually seek forgiveness from my 11-year-old granddaughter, who stoically had to ignore Dwayne's questioning look. Didn't complain that I subsequently had to steal more handfuls of her popcorn, which as a result eventually ran out long before the end of the show. Thanks for a great show, the highlight of my radio listening day. Well, corn-popping Jerry signing off with his confession. Let's check out with the voice of authority and wisdom, Sister Susie.
Well, Jerry, there's a few things here that I'd like to question, because you said you just only took 2 of your grandchildren to New York. What about the other ones that you left back home? I don't know. This is just a bit mean. Also, I think you've just don't like The Rock. Who doesn't like The Rock? And I just can't forgive you, because you just created a mess and you didn't clean up after yourself. So,
well, that's the thing. If you spill popcorn, you clear it up. That's the bottom line.
at least, move it into a little pile.
Also,
It's
that's
all
what
in
the
one
bucket's
case.
for, is to shovel it all either
What?
back into the bucket, or you could just shovel it into another aisle and look as though it's someone else's.
Seems unlikely.
Brother from another gutter. what are you
Well,
saying?
first of all, I don't think the need to forgive Dwayne lookalike. No one needs to see your tats, Dwayne. No one's impressed with your physique. Also,
I
well,
might
no, I don't
I
think they
would
are.
be.
Don't think they are. Also, there is a special circle in hell reserved for those people who decide to go to the bar and then come in after the performance has started. Unlucky, sunshine. The show has started. You're watching from the sidelines. I've only done it once, but I had a very, very good reason for being late. So,
Of course.
and so it only applies to me. And for that reason, I am going to forgive.
The people's verdict, please. Do you forgive corn popping Jerry? On the text 61054, start your message with Simon. Or you can email simon@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Just before the news, we had a confession from corn popping Jerry. He lost control of his popcorn. It all descended on Dwayne The Rock Johnson, or a lookalike.
Yeah.
Anyway, with hilarious consequences, here's the people's verdict.
Tommy and Lincoln forgiven. I can't stand it when people turn up late to things and then the whole row is forced to stand
Yes.
up as they shuffle past. And who wears a T-shirt in the winter? The Rock deserved it. Vicky says not forgiven. He should have bought his own popcorn rather than stealing his granddaughter's.
true.
Also, if he'd sat on the seat properly rather than acting like a 5-year-old, he might have kept the popcorn where it was supposed to be and not covered the person in front of him. But finally, Sean says, I agree completely with Matt.
Yes.
The theatre staff provide more than enough notice to the audience to get to the seats. Plus, tattoos have never interested me at all. And if you're late in, you don't sit down until an appropriate time in the show.
Thank you, and your confessions will be welcome. Maybe you have a cinema confession, a theatre confession, other members of the audience being annoying kind of confession. We'd like to hear it. If we use it, you get a smart speaker. You send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk.